You're all set, Alex.
Thank you, Erin. Thank you also from me to everyone who is joining us today. As Erin mentioned, I'm the Director of Online Teaching here at SUNY Online. I am also occasionally an adjunct at SUNY Albany in the Department of Education Theory and Practice and teach Introduction to Online Teaching, although I haven't done that in a while because I've been working on my dissertation, which I just turned in on Sunday, and will be defending April 28th. I'm also a Middle States peer reviewer. I'm also, to my very bones, an instructional designer. And I also usually um, uh, introduce myself as Oscar's mom. And I am incredibly proud of Oscar. And there have been a lot of folks who have contributed to Oscar over the years. But Oscar is very, very near and dear to my heart. And I'm thrilled that you are interested this topic, supporting regular and substantive interaction, and then also by way of that in Oscar. The first thing I want to do, and Erin's going to be putting links in the chat for you as we go, but all of the links that I'm going to show today can be found at this bit.ly, and it is case sensitive. So I don't want you to worry about having to take screenshots or grab the URLs of anything. Everything is in that folder that you'll get to, and it will look like this. There's a bunch of stuff in it. And then in addition to the presentation slides, there's also a page that has all the links. And they are here. So you'll see all of the links to the session that are here. And of course, if you have any questions along the way, and we'll have time for questions also at the end, but just want you to know that all of the materials are in the goodie bag that's in Google, and all the links and the presentation slides themselves are there as well. And so let's give you a sort of overview of what we're going to be talking about today. If you're here to learn more about regular and substantive interaction, then you are in the right place. We're going to talk about that in great detail to make sure that you understand this regulation. It's a federal regulation, and how it applies to online instructional design, and how Oscar can help you to support that. And then you'll get a brief overview of Oscar in case you're not familiar with Oscar. And we will actually talk about some of the Oscar standards. I've picked a few for us to talk about, to show you how those Oscar standards can either directly support RSI, or they could be leveraged to support RSI. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that means. You're getting a bonus preview of developing a plan to ensure compliance. And we do another webinar, which I think is coming up next month, on developing an implementation plan for the use of Oscar. And so you could direct that implementation plan to an initiative around regular and substantive interaction. And so I'm going to give you a little bit of a preview of the materials that I go through in that other workshop, and point you to that workshop to come back to learn more about how you might create an implementation plan to support either RSI or some other initiative around quality, or around improving the instructional design of online courses, if that's something you would be interested in. You'll also um, earn a couple of badges for attending this workshop, and you'll be invited to join our community of online teaching fellows as a friend of SUNY if you're not from SUNY, or in one of our roles if you are from SUNY. We also have a new Oscar user group that you might be interested in joining. and then a couple of other resources if we have time at the end, some bonus resources that I will share with you. And those links are in the link document. So if we don't get to it, you can take a look at some of those bonus things if you're interested. All right. So any questions so far? Everybody in the right place? I think a lot of people have joined us since we opened up. And so if you would put your name and your institution and where you happen to be, either physically or mentally, it would help us to get to know who's in the room. Would love to know who all is with us today. So let's begin to talk about the scope and purpose of the regulation. And so this is going to be a little bit, letter of the law. I want you to understand what this regulation is about. It's a new, relatively new, 2021, I think is when it first came out. Federal U.S. Department of Education regulation, and it provides definitions of distance education that require that institutions ensure regular and substantive interaction between a student and the instructor or instructors in the course. And this regulation has implications at the institutional level, at the faculty level, and at the ID course design levels. The determination of what counts as distance education, blended, hybrid, high flex, or other variations is left up to your individual accreditor's discretion. So I want to make sure to mention that. So in general, this regulation has a very narrow scope, and it is intended to distinguish, it's intended to help the Department of Education distinguish distance education from correspondence courses for financial aid purposes. So I want to make sure that you clearly understand that, whether you're at the institutional level, the faculty level, or at the instructional design level. RSI has nothing to do with quality, with course quality, with online quality. It is not about ensuring quality of online interaction or quality in online course design. I want to reinforce what you're already doing today. Your current online course design and teaching practices already support compliance. So if you're doing this well, at the institutional level, the instructor level, or the instructional design level, following standards and having standards for various aspects that we know are best practices in online teaching and learning, that most likely you're already supporting compliance. And again, RSI has absolutely nothing to do with quality. It's merely the vehicle that the DOE uses in order to distinguish between correspondence courses and distance education courses for the purposes of financial aid. So it is a legal federal requirement that distinguishes the status of those courses. And the reason for that is because correspondence courses are not eligible for financial aid. So institutions would risk losing access to financial aid if the institution were to be audited, for example, and found out of compliance. So, and if you are found out of compliance, then you would be required to repay financial aid associated with the correspondence courses and students. And so, also, just so that you know, the regulations related to RSI were not waived during COVID. So that's important to note too. They're not waiving these regulations, so they're important to be aware of. They have implications at the institution, faculty, and instructional design levels, and the scope is very narrow. Also, again, you're already most likely in compliance if you are attending to the effective practices in online course design and delivery already. All right, so let's go to the next slide and talk about compliance at the institutional level. So The institutional responsibilities to support the compliance with this regulation include that the instruction be delivered by appropriate forms of media, such as an LMS or an LMS plus Zoom or Teams or whatever platform you're using, and then other forms might be allowed. So initially, it was the credentialed instructor of record and not a TA or GA or other assistant that counted in terms of institutional compliance, meaning that the assistant could assist and participate in the course, but it didn't really count as RSI compliance. The department has recently updated and clarified that it actually defers to accreditors for decisions relating to qualifications of instructors and approval of other instructional activities that could be considered substantive interaction. And so what they're essentially saying is that if you have any questions about whether team instructors or teaching assistants or graduate assistants would meet accreditor qualifications, it'd be wise if you run any questions or concerns that you might have by your accreditor and document the responses. The department confirmed that information in the preamble to the final regulations that it expects an institution to maintain policies and procedures that create expectations for faculty to substantively interact with students, but has declined to provide further information. So institutions have discretion on specific methods to use to implement and enforce these policies relating to RSI. So in general, the department would evaluate whether an institution has created expectations for instructors to monitor each student's engagement and substantively engage with them on the basis of that monitoring. So to determine an institution's compliance with these requirements. The institution noted that it could be done through a combination of the establishment of policies and procedures and regular evaluation to ensure that instructors are complying with the institution's requirements for monitoring and outreach. All right, so let's talk about some definitions, because we've used the term regular and we've used the term substantive. And so I want to make sure that we are all using those words and understanding exactly what they mean based on the DOE's definitions. So the department has indicated a number of issues will be addressed on a case-by-case basis, such as whether the interactions are commensurate with the length of time and the amount of content in the course or the competency, the specific criteria for measuring compliance when the promptly and proactively requirement of the regular portion of the definition. And then the department noted that institutions must ensure that they can document the length of the course in weeks of instruction and the numbers of credit hours or equivalent associated with the course or competency. And all other determinations related to this requirement would be determined on a case-by-case basis. So for example, scheduled office hours can fulfill part of the requirement for regular interaction between instructors and students. Previously, some financial aid officers or other folks on campuses were reluctant to count office hours, as they might not necessarily appear to be part of the regular determination based on the definition, but the DOE confirmed that office hours could fulfill part of the regular interaction requirements as long as the instructor made themselves regularly available on a scheduled basis, regardless of whether the students chose to make use of the opportunity or interact with the instructor at the scheduled time. So that's really important to note, that, if you build it and they don't come in terms of compliance regarding office hours, it's okay. It's just that it has to be there, it has to be present, it has to be clear, it has to be communicated, initiated by the instructor, on the scheduled and regular basis. And then that counts as RSI. The office hours will count. All right, so institutional strategies to address RSI could be to, for example, adopt institution-wide policies or approaches or procedures, recommendations, best practices, such as having something in the syllabus that talks about how the instructor will address regular and substantive interaction. And if you use those particular words, that language, then you shore up your ability to demonstrate compliance. Another way to address it at the institutional level is to assist faculty to see how current best practices already support compliance, such as office hours, for example, and making sure that the way that the office hours are designed will meet those definitions of regular, substantive, and so forth. So it's not just enough to have the office hours there. It should be in the syllabus. And maybe even use the RSI language to point to the office hours in the syllabus. It should be announced to the students that, how they avail themselves of the office hours. It should, anything that the instructor can do to make sure that they are proactively making sure that students are aware that those office hours are there and available to them, then that will ensure compliance with the use of office hours. All right. Another thing institutionally that can be done is to provide faculty and IDs with support and professional development to build awareness and understanding about the regulation and institutional approaches to compliance. And then also you could provide some standardized recommended options to ensure some systematic consistency, such as, for example, an optional form. I'm going to show you in a little bit a form that the faculty and the IDs could use to kind of document the RSI measures in their individual online courses, and that could be a way that you could have some standardized way to document how the courses are individually complying. All right, so let's go on to the definition of substantive. And the definition of substantive is about interaction that is engaging students in teaching, learning, and assessment consistent with the content under the discussion, and also includes at least two of the following. And I'm kind of reading you this slide because this is really the definition of it. And it is providing direct instruction, assessing or providing feedback on student coursework, providing information or responding to questions about content, the content of the course or competency, facilitating group discussion regarding content of the course, and other instructional activities that might be approved by the institution or program's accrediting agency. For this definition, the important one to note is direct instruction. And initially, when the regulation came out, it was unclear how that was being defined. And so we've since gotten clarification from them. And they, according to them, it means live synchronous instruction where both the instructor and the student are online and in communication at the same time. So for it to be substantive, it has to be about the content of the course and including two of the things that are on that list, including direct instruction, which could include, direct instruction means live and synchronous, right? So it needs to be course related, content related, academic in nature, and two of the measures on that list. So they also said that, some things that would be addressed on a case-by-case basis would be determinations about the degree of activity in facilitating group discussions, and they wouldn't give any guidelines about how much activity satisfied the requirement of the substantive portion of the definition. So that makes it a challenge when they're kind of asking you to quantify, but they're not giving you they're leaving that to, kind of up in the air. But again, as I mentioned, current best practices in online teaching and learning and how people teach and learn well online are pretty well known. And so if you are following those best practices regarding interaction, then most likely you can demonstrate compliance. You will be demonstrating compliance. So this is important to understand their definition. And again, it's not about quality. They're trying to differentiate between correspondence courses and distance learning courses for the purposes of financial aid, full stop. And so, if you only have a course that is compliant with RSI to the letter of the definition, it is not a high quality course because it omits student to instructor interaction and student to student interaction. It's only talking about instructor to student interaction. So these definitions are important, and it's also important to understand sort of that narrow scope that I mentioned. All right, let's go on to the definition of scheduled and predictable. And so that entails specific scheduled opportunities to interact with the instructor on academic issues via a specific modality, regardless of whether the students avail themselves of the opportunity or not. The important part is that they be in place and that they be initiated by the instructor. So not assumed just because it's in the syllabus that there's office hours. There has to be some initiated element by the instructor. So an announcement or, a discussion that points the students to where they would get the additional support or the additional, get access to the office hours. So those are the things that are important. All right, so that's scheduled and predictable. So let's review a little bit. It has to be regular substantive interaction has to be with the instructor as defined by the institution's accreditor. It has to be initiated by the instructor. It has to be scheduled and predictable. And so it also needs to be academic in nature. So for example, an ice-breaking activity that talks about if you were a tree, what kind of tree would you be? That is an interaction. It might be scheduled, it might be predictable, it might be initiated by the instructor, but it's not academic in nature. So it wouldn't count. So, the way to make an icebreaker count as RSI would be to frame the icebreaking activity or question or interaction around perhaps prior knowledge that the students may have about the course content, perhaps about expectations that the students may have regarding the course. So by drawing in to the ice-breaking conversation, some academic aspect of it might count. Now, you might not want to do it that way. You might want to have the ice-breaking discussion be not academic in nature because you're trying to establish social presence and you're trying to establish trust and community. And so you want to take that in a different direction, and that's fine. You have other opportunities throughout the course to demonstrate RSI. You don't have to use the icebreaker for that. But just saying that if you did want to count the icebreaker, it would have to have some element to it that was academic in nature in order for it to count. All right. So I am going to pause there, I think, and see if there are any questions about any of the stuff that I just talked about.
Absolutely, there are questions. So the chat is very lively right now. Let me back up so that we can get your impressions, and others, please feel free to contribute what you do to help folks who are asking questions. We would love for you to also respond. So the first question that I see, Alex, is Siraj asking, will the instructor communicating via email? So for example, every Monday at 9, what is happening that week? Does that meet RSI?
Well, that would be one way that they could demonstrate it, and by email, you know, I'm not sure why they wouldn't put it in the course through the course email, or in an announcement through the announcement features of the LMS.
Mhm.
But I that seems to be regular. That seems to be substantive, predictable. So you could point to it if they're actually doing it and they can document it and have those emails that they could show, then I would say yes. Now, again, I'm not a lawyer and I'm not an expert. So, I know some things. I've read this regulation. I have asked people who are lawyers and who are experts in order to prepare this presentation. But so if you have any question, I would suggest contacting your accreditor to make sure that you answer some of the questions that might be specific to your program or institution. But the key is to be able to demonstrate that you are doing things in a regular, scheduled, predictable, instructor-initiated way. And so, based on that, those emails, I would think would count.
Yeah, and there were some suggestions about including it, the schedule in the course, sending
Yeah,
announcements, using announcements like you
yeah,
mentioned.
yeah. Leveraging
Another,
the LMS, I think, is a really good way to do it, because then you have artifacts that are right within the course that can be pointed to, right? As opposed to digging them out of email.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Another question is about Zoom meetings. If you have Zoom meetings and no one attends, posting the recordings, posts recordings of the Zoom meetings. A question about what to do, how to communicate with faculty about this, and kind of impressing upon them the importance of not just putting up some sort of a canned lecture.
So it's really important, and it's the institution's responsibility to make sure that the institution is in compliance, which means that they're helping the faculty to be in compliance both with their actual interactions and the design of the course, right? So, of course, helping faculty to understand the best practices in how people teach and learn well online, which requires interaction between the instructor and the student, between the student and the instructor, and between the students themselves. That those we know that those are how people teach and learn well online, and there's ample research and evidence to support how you build an online asynchronous learning community with those things. That has to have all of those things: instructor to student, student to instructor, and student to student, right? So if you're doing that already, then you're already in compliance. And so talking to faculty to help them know that some of the best practices that they may be already implementing are already helping them to be in compliance. We just need to make sure that you're thinking through the definitions there of scheduled, predictable, and so forth, and substantive. So all of those definitions, to make sure that you don't just have the office hours listed in the syllabus, that you also make an announcement about it periodically in the course
Mhm.
to help students make sure that they know that they can avail themselves of office hours and how, right? Even though it may be in the syllabus, the proactive, action of the instructor of making an announcement is what makes it in compliance. So it may be in compliance because you have it, but you have to bump it up a little bit more to truly be in compliance, and do that announcement to make sure that the students get that, you know, proactive, initiated by the instructor, predictable thing in there. So yeah.
So this one is prefaced by whether or not this practice is good teaching, but do there need to be activities that are both regular and substantive, or if there's separate activities, right? Some regular, some substantive. Would that meet the requirement? Do they need to be
No,
both?
no, it's both. It has to be regular and substantive and initiated by the instructor. So it can't just be, activities that are academic in nature. No, it has to be an activity that's academic in nature that is also initiated by the instructor. The interaction is initiated by the instructor, and it has to be scheduled and predictable. So it's not just enough to, have for the compliance for this particular regulation, you have to have the additional piece of making sure that the instructor is proactively promoting the mechanisms for the regular substantive interaction. Does that make sense?
Yep. And so before we jump into the Oscar standards, were there any other questions? Did I miss anything? Okay. All right. I'll keep following along in the chat. Thanks, Alex.
So we're going to talk about, some specific standards that I sort of picked out for you to take a look at. But, I think overall, the main thing for this regulation is that you have your vehicles for interaction between the instructor and the student, and you have to supplement those with things like announcements. That goes a long way, because that then demonstrates that it's being initiated by the instructor, and of course it would be academic in nature. So like it's not enough to have an auto-generated feedback on a quiz or a test or some sort of an assessment. It's not enough to count as RSI that the student completes the quiz and gets the auto feedback from the instructor, even if the instructor spent years and hours and crafting beautiful feedback, and maybe there's video or audio included, right? It's not enough. In order to comply, the instructor would have to have a discussion board or an announcement that tells the students, you've just gotten your feedback. If you have any questions about the assignment, your grade, how to improve, come to office hours, and here's how. Or, join this discussion and we can talk about it. And that could be like, either individually with students or sort of as a group with the students. So it's not enough just to do the thing. You have to also proactively, as the instructor, tell the students how they can get help, how they can improve, how they can get feedback, how they can better understand, and there has to be a mechanism that initiates that from the instructor to the student. It's not just enough for them. You can't just assume that you give them feedback and that they will contact you in order to comply with this. And in fact, that's a good practice, right? Not making assumptions. There are many first generation students that might not know, for example, what office hours are and how they are used and what they could use them for. And so it's just good practice to make sure that students know and understand how they can access the instructor and how they can get the help that they need, the academic help that they need, in order to understand better what they've done and how they can improve it, or what they are actually doing. All right. So anything else?
A quick one, Alex, which may actually be addressed in one of the standards, and if so, that's okay to wait on it. But the question about discussions, if faculty regularly participate in discussions, would that be a best practice?
So yes, and so yeah, the instructor, if the instructor initiates the discussion and then interacts in that discussion, then yes.
Yep. Okay.
but again, that's not the only thing that you can do, right? Like in
Right.
order to comply, you have to have a number of things. And again, they have been very vague about what the number of things
Mhm.
is and the
Right.
amount of things is. So you want to make sure that you're doing things like having it in your syllabus and having it in your announcements and thinking about, the expectations of the course as you're starting the course, and then as you're actually having them do activities, and then as you're doing assessments, what are the ways that the instructor is, in a proactive, predictable, and scheduled way, and related to the academic aspect of it, the ways that they are interacting with the students to make sure that the students know how to avail themselves of the instructor, extra help, whatever the students need, clarification on whatever. All right, so maybe let's just do the overview of Oscar. And can I get a sense of how many people are already familiar with Oscar or not? Is there a way to, can you raise your hands
Folks raise
maybe?
their hand or put it in the chat. Sure.
Yeah, so
See what we've
if
got.
you're already familiar with Oscar, I just want to make sure. Oh, maybe I should ask the other side of the question. Who is not familiar? So put your hand down if you're already familiar with Oscar. Sorry about that. And just put your hand up if you're not familiar with Oscar at all. All right. Aaron, I can't see
So I
the
have just a few
a couple.
and
Okay.
a couple in the chat saying a little bit.
Okay. So I just want to make sure, that everybody has a good understanding of what Oscar is, and a little bit about what it does. So this is a timeline that I've updated to show sort of the trajectory of the evolution of Oscar. And as I said, many folks have been involved across the SUNY system and even beyond in the development of the tool. We started out back in 2014 with the initial design. It actually was designed in my head back in 1998, honestly, but we didn't until 2014 actually build Oscar. Prior to that, we had checklists, as I'm sure many of you may have also used over the years if you've been doing this a while. But we actually developed Oscar as a process and as a set of tools starting back in January 14th, and it's gone through a number of iterations. We're now in version 4.0, and most recently we added some standards to Oscar related to the SUNY Coil, which has to do with virtual exchange and online international learning. And so yeah, we're currently in version 4. 4.1 is the one that has the COIL standards. So it's been around for a while, and as I said, I'm super proud of Oscar and how Oscar has moved through uh, you know, through the world. I always say any rubric is better than no rubric, but there are some things that are unique about Oscar that differentiate it from other rubrics that are out there. And I have this video. I'm not going to play it, but I want to encourage the folks who are not as familiar with Oscar as some of us, to take a look at that video, because it in 5 minutes really explains everything that you kind of need to know about Oscar that differentiates it from other rubrics. And I think, it's important to know that it's not just a rubric. It includes tools and processes and web materials. It's openly licensed for anyone to be able to use and adapt however they would like. It can be used to inform new online faculty development, as well as online course design and experienced online course design activities. It really supports continuous improvement, and it directly addresses accessibility and RSI, which is unique across the rubrics that are out there. And so it's also not intended to evaluate courses or faculty. Like, you can't fail Oscar. It really is intended to be a professional development tool that supports a culture of continuous improvement and that supports conversations between the instructional designer and the instructor, or if you don't have instructional designers, for the instructor to understand some of those best practices, evidence-based best practices that we've been talking about that have been researched for the last 20 years, 30 years. So there's a lot that's known, and that all has been infused into OSCQR. So it's more than just a rubric. It's a set of tools and materials and a process, all intended to support continuous improvement of the design of courses. All right, so take a look at that video, especially if you're trying to, help others understand what OSCQR is really about, to differentiate how it is unique from other rubrics. The video does a pretty good job. Yeah, I just talked about that. So let's look at some specific standards. The website is there that shows all of the various standards, and I have them in bold here as well as in gray, so that you can see with the group that I worked with to come up with this version with RSI, we determined that some of the OSCQR standards could directly address the regulation. So the standard directly addresses the regulation. And there were some that, if you did them in a particular way, could be used to, to leverage the standard to address compliance. So my point in telling you this, well, there's several, but I want to make sure that you know and understand that all of these best practices that are in OSCQR essentially support, high quality online instructional design. Some of them directly support the compliance with RSI, and some of them could be leveraged depending on how you actually do it. This is not to say that every single standard in OSCQR has to be completed in order to meet compliance with RSI. You're going to have to judge based on the instructor, based on your institution, based on your accreditors, based on the level of the course, based on the discipline, and maybe there are disciplinary specific requirements for that particular program, and that the accreditors would want to see in there, like a nursing program or dental assisting program or whatever. There might be stuff that's specific to the program. So you want to take all of that into consideration and then look at the OSCQR standards to see which are the most appropriate to use, that you are going to determine between, the institution, the faculty, the program, and if you have instructional designers, which are going to be the ones most appropriate for that particular course, that instructor, and that level, and so forth, in order to demonstrate compliance. And it might vary from course to course or program to program. Possibly you could, at the institutional level, set some expectations and some standards to get some sort of consistent, systematic elements into, the courses across the board. But it's definitely not intended. I'm not saying every single one of these things that are either gray or bold that you have to do them. They're just they could be used to demonstrate compliance, either directly or in a particular way. So let's just talk about this first one, which is in gray, for example. And the first one has to do with, the course, including a welcome and getting started aspect to it. And so, most courses, online courses have this, and so again, most likely, if you're doing this in a particularly aligned with standards, you're most likely meeting the definition of compliance. Again, like I said though before, the content has to be academic in nature. So if your icebreaker, for example, that would fit into this particular standard is not academic in nature, then it doesn't, right? But that doesn't mean that you couldn't have an additional um, discussion in that icebreaking area or in that time period at the beginning of the class where you had an academically focused discussion or voice thread or something that was in fact academic in nature and that could be documented as being in compliance. So with this particular standard, your welcome or your announcements with a discussion forum for questions where you explain the expectations for communication and interaction, that kind of thing would count. You could use this particular standard in that particular way to demonstrate compliance. So it would just be, the combination of announcements pointing to the syllabus, maybe a syllabus quiz, and an additional question area, like an ask a question area or a talk with the professor area that you would announce and say, if you have any questions on the syllabus, regarding X, Y, or Z, please join this particular discussion. And so something like that, very specific, pointing to, the place where they can get the academic information, and then a place where they can actually ask questions, and it's initiated by the instructor with the announcement, then that would count, right? That's how you would make this particular standard be part of what you could document as being in compliance. All right, let's look at number 2 here, which directly supports RSI, and that would entail, providing an overall orientation or overview of the course, including module level overviews that make all of the content, the activities, the assignments, and all of that stuff predictable and easy to navigate and find. So for this one to fall into the compliance, you would add scheduled discussions for students to ask questions and get clarification on the course and the course module overviews or the contents of the modules. So it's as simple as having an announcement and a discussion where the students can go and ask. And that could be, in every module, you could have an announcement that when a new module opens up, the instructor says, if you have any questions about this module, go here in order to find your questions, or come to office hours to ask questions, something like that. And then that would demonstrate the compliance. For the third one here, I actually have, let's see, the third one is here. And I wanted to point out that you could actually, this is the one about making course expectations clear and findable. And so if you've been to some of my other OSCQR webinars, you've seen this before, but here is the course syllabus template that we created in conjunction with this and another project. And you can take a look at this. Again, it's a template, and it can be used either as a model so that you can look at your own syllabus and see what elements it has and doesn't have with yours, and see if there's something that you might want to add, or you could just take the whole thing, make a copy of it, and you can use this. And that's going to depend on your institution and what their processes and policies are around syllabi, but it's just there as a model to help you see some unique elements that it includes that you might want to consider. And the one I want to point you to here is this one on regular and substantive interaction. So if you add a section to your syllabi, and you could do this for all of your courses, the online, that have an online component to them, just to add it to the syllabus, and then of course you actually this has to actually be done, right? The instructors actually have to do this, but if it's in the syllabi, then it's one easy way to demonstrate compliance if you're called to do that. All right, let me go back to where was I? I was on this page, right? So we just did 3. Let's go to here, and let's talk about 29. So 29 is another one that you can use to demonstrate compliance. And for this one, this standard aligns really closely with the community of inquiry definition of teaching presence, which, as defined, is the design and facilitation and direction of cognitive and social processes for the purposes of realizing personally meaningful and educationally worthwhile learning outcomes. If you're not familiar with the community of inquiry framework, it's foundational to most of the best practices that we know of that have been researched to promote high quality interactions in online technology mediated instruction. So for this one, this is where you can find opportunities for those 4 or 5 elements that they said you have to have 2 of, right? You can use it to assess and provide feedback. You can provide information or respond to questions about course content. You can facilitate group discussions, and you can do other instructional activities that might be required by your accrediting body. So this one in particular really is about that substantive interaction. Okay, so that one was 29. And you can see right in the language of the standard itself, it says facilitate regular and substantive interaction with the instructor. And again, that's instructor to student, right? Let's look at interaction and look at the first one here. No, let's look at the second one. No, the first one. So this one is the letter of RSI 38, and you can see it right in the text, right? Regular and substantive instructor to student expectations. So of all of the standards in OSCQR, this is the one that is the letter of RSI, the one that is most closely associated with RSI. And then standard 39 is the spirit of RSI more. And so these two together, 38 and 39, are really the main standards in OSCQR that directly address regular and substantive interaction. And so for the first one, you want to, in order to make sure that you're in compliance, you want to direct learners to ask questions and to interact with the instructor to let them know they can interact with the instructor about course content, expectations, seeking help, getting feedback. And you can do that in online discussion forums or in office hours. And it's just good practice. This is just generally good practice. And so additionally to support compliance, you want to schedule, make sure that it's scheduled with a specific instructor facilitated avenue like the office hours or a discussion forum, and that it's on course topics, and that it's intended to provide clarification, help, or feedback, or in order for it to demonstrate compliance. So that one is the letter of RSI. The one that's the spirit of RSI is more like that's 38, about the expectations for interactions being clear. That's one where, again, that syllabus statement that I showed you earlier, that's where that would come in handy for compliance. So you have the thing in the syllabus, and then you shore that up with announcements periodically throughout the course to make sure that the students avail themselves of whatever the mechanisms are that the instructor is saying that they're going to do in order to demonstrate regular and substantive interaction. All right, so let's go to, I think I have one more left to talk with you about, and I think that one is, I think 47 was the one I wanted to mention to you. Is that right? Yeah, so for 47, the course provides opportunities for the learners to review their performance and assess their own learning through the course, through pre-tests and self-tests with feedback, reflective assignments, and so forth. So this one is, I already touched on it a little bit, this one, it's gray, right? So it means that you could leverage this one for RSI if you, in addition to providing those pre-tests and those assignments and giving feedback, if you, in addition to that, um, made an announcement and or created a discussion forum that pointed students to those areas or those vehicles so that they could get additional information on their performance. So, if they need extra help because they didn't do well, or if they need clarification on a particular point, or if they just want to understand their grade, if they, whatever their question might be related to those assessments, if there is a proactive mechanism initiated by the instructor to let the students know after they have gotten their feedback, that this is how they could get additional assistance or additional information on the assessment and their performance in that assessment. So it's not just enough to give them the assignment and the test and give them the feedback. The added piece is the announcement and the place, whether it's office hours or a discussion, for them to know that after this particular assessment, this is what they could do. So that's that one. All right. Any question on any of these standards before I go to the next section?
Yes. Question about office hours. If an instructor states that office hours are by appointment and says they will set up these office hours as needed, that would not meet RSI. Is that right? So they will.
So there has to be a way for the student to understand how to do that, right? So if the instructor has like Calendly or something like that and says, this is how I do my office hours, you have to go to Calendly and set it up, or you have to email me and let me know when you would like to meet, and then we'll negotiate that. Then that counts, but it doesn't count if it's just sitting in the syllabus. The instructor has to, like in an announcement or in some sort of a communication, make sure that the students know and understand that that's the process.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Yep. And then someone asked about asking a question or posting in the chat. Did somebody want to ask a question out loud? Or are there any others before we move on?
Hi, sorry, I had it sort of, hi, it's Emily. Thank you. This is great. Mine goes back a little bit because I use intelligence agents quite a bit, and I missed the first 10 minutes, so I don't know if you said anything about them, but they are set up to automatically remind students to do things primarily. But also is it when they submit things or when feedback happens, it can also automatically generate something to the students. So I just wanted to bring up something related to that part of all.
Yeah, I think that would count. But again, I'm not a lawyer and I'm not an expert, but because it's initiated by the instructor and it is being it's not just static, it's coming up at a particular moment in time in the course, and it's initiated by the instructor even though the intelligent agent is triggering it. I think that would count. And now again, it can't just be static, right? Like there has to be an interactive component to it so that your intelligent agent is pointing them to either an office hour or to a discussion where they could get additional information. If the intelligent agent is just providing them with content, with information, that would not be enough. So if it's like feedback, right, or something like that, that's not going to be enough. It has to be, there has to be an interaction component to it where the student is directed to have access to the instructor for further information, clarification, and so forth, right?
Correct, I understand.
Yeah. Yep.
I'm lucky to be trained in online course, and I was so happy to hear you say community of inquiry framework earlier.
Yep. Yep.
And yeah, so the intelligent agent has a built-in email that like everything in the world that is sent from me typically ends in please email me if you have any additional questions, problems, or and give them a contact. Um, or even like if there's a one-on-one chat where they can address whatever questions that they have.
Yep.
So
Yeah. That
yeah,
sounds good, Emily. That sounds great.
yeah, I just thought it would be it's a good, way to keep up with them.
Yeah. So look, we're at 1 o'clock, and I still have a couple of things I wanted to show you. So I'm just going to buzz through them really quickly. If you're not familiar with how to get Oscar, you go to the Oscar website and go to the Get Oscar drop-down menu, and well, you just click on the Get Oscar, and you can get the PDF version of the of Oscar. You can. It's also in Spanish now. That's new. So if you have Spanish colleagues, you could share it with them if you want. And then you also down here can get the interactive rubric or the interactive dashboard. And I do other webinars where I go into more detail about the interactive rubric and dashboard. So if you're interested in those tools, I would encourage you to come to those. This is the PDF version of the rubric. This is the interactive version of the rubric, and um, I'm not seeing the things down at the bottom. Oh, here we go. That's just the front page. This is looks more like the rubric itself. You see these little tabs down at the bottom. Um, this looks more like the rubric. And then we also have the dashboard, which is for larger scale activities that need to be managed centrally. So if you're managing like all of the reviews of all of the courses in your institution or in your department, the dashboard could help you to manage that and understand some of the details around those reviews a little bit better. And then I wanted to just touch on developing an RSI plan. I'd like to invite you to come back. I think it's in May. Erin, is it in May? To come back to the session on creating an implementation plan around Oscar. And so I give you a template, and this is the template, and it's a full-on template. And it goes on like it's a multiple page thing. And we go through how to fill this out for a particular focus. So you could have an RSI focus to your implementation plan. And then I also have this worksheet that I wanted to share with you. It's in the links document. So if you wanted to, and you can customize this, it's a template, right? You can grab a copy of this and customize it to yourself. But I've gone through and created a way for you to document with the instructor how you will be addressing RSI in any particular course. So you could fill this out for each of the courses with the instructor, and then you would have this documented so that if you were ever called to demonstrate compliance, you would have this mechanism in place. And I think that's it. The only other thing I wanted to make sure that you know is to join us as a friend of SUNY, or if you're within SUNY, to join as a fellow, either as an interested fellow or experienced, whatever your role is that you would like. And all of these links are in the document, the links document, and you'll get badges depending on what role you sign up for. And I'm inviting you to join our online teaching community and also the Oscar user group. This is new, and I think this is the second group of people that we've invited to join the Oscar user group. So I hope if you're interested, you'll join the group so we can continue this conversation. And if you're interested in talking more about RSI or in other aspects of Oscar, I love talking about it. So and everybody else who's in there, I think, loves talking about it too. So we can share what we know with each other. You'll get this badge for participating in this workshop. And I just wanted to mention the webinar series for Oscar continues, and the next one is going to be that implementation one, and that's going to be on May 7th.
7th. Yeah.
Designing an OSCQR implementation plan will be at May 7th. And then we also have a series of webinars that we do throughout the semester. And if you're interested in any of these topics, we invite you to join us for those as well. And I have the link to our website, I think, if you're interested in learning more about SUNY online teaching. And again, these are the resources here. And there's the slides, and there's the document that has links. And here's the link document. And I think that's it. And I'm happy to answer any questions. I know it's a little bit over time. So if anyone is interested in hanging out and chatting a little bit more, I'm happy to do that. And if not, thank you all so much for spending your lunchtime with us and for joining. And I appreciate your interest in OSCQR as well as in RSI, and hope that this has given you some information that can help you to think about the different levels at the institutional level, the faculty level, and the instructional design level that are important. Maureen, you have a question. Hey, Maureen.
Hey, Alex, how are you? On
I'm
my calendar, it
good.
said that this went till 1:30, so I hope that it's okay to go a little over. So could you just expand a little bit more on how the video lessons would not be direct instruction? Because I know I have a lot of faculty that would record lectures so that it is direct instruction.
So direct instruction, as defined by the DOE now, and there was question about this, a while ago, but they have now clarified that what direct instruction means. And direct instruction is related to, hang on, I'm trying to find the actual definition here. All right, direct instruction has been clarified to mean live synchronous instruction where both the instructor and the student are online and in communication at the same time. That's what direct instruction means. So video is not direct instruction. Beautiful lectures or PowerPoints or audio files are not direct instruction according to the DOE. Now, I might define that differently according to the Community of Inquiry framework, right? Which has a very specific definition. And that's why there was confusion, because the DOE was using that terminology, direct instruction, when all of us who are in online teaching and learning who use the foundational theoretical framework of the Community of Inquiry have a different definition of that word, or those words. So direct instruction is one of the ways that can be that defines substantive. So live synchronous stuff defines substantive. Assessing and providing feedback on students' work is it also is defined as substantive. And then providing information or responding to questions about the content is another way that is substantive. And then facilitating group discussions is another one. And then they leave an opening for the program's accrediting agency to weigh in on that as well. So, but substantive is not enough. Can't just be substantive, right? It has to be substantive, it has to be regular, it has to be predictable, and it also has to be, regular, predictable, scheduled, and substantive. It has to be all of those things. So in order for the feedback to count, you give the feedback, maybe it's an automated feedback and it's beautiful, the LMS does it for you. But in addition to that, you have to have the discussion or the pointer to the office hours in order to close that loop on interaction. The feedback is not instructor to student. It doesn't count as instructor to student. It counts as substantive. So you need the additional piece for the interaction of the office hours or the interaction in a discussion for that to close that interaction loop.
Right. So with our asynchronous courses, that sort of it's hard to do any type of live, like the synchronous
No, no, no,
instruction.
Maureen, you don't have to do live, right? That it's one of two, right? So
Okay.
substantive interaction must contain one of the two. So if you don't do live synchronous, don't do that one.
Right.
You've got the other four that you can do, the other three
Okay.
at least that you can do. So,
Okay.
it's not saying you got to do all of those. It's just saying you have to do two out of the four, or however
Okay.
many there are, five.
And then if I could just tag on, how does a rubric fit in? Is that enough feedback? If we're using the rubric tool, you can make sort of, I mean, it's substantive in a way because it's very specific with the rubric, but is that enough on feedback? Should we add additional feedback at the bottom area of the rubric if we're using a rubric for grading?
So I can't say because I'm not looking at your rubrics, right? But I would assume that the rubric would be sufficient, and but it needs to include the discussion for the student to get additional input and feedback
Got it.
on their
Okay.
performance, as well as on any, help that they might need in understanding how they didn't meet
Right.
the requirements of the rubric, right?
Right. Yeah. So I've been trying to use the little feedback under each area of the rubric. There's a little
Yep.
feedback thing for criteria, and you can put
Yep.
a little feedback thing in there. But
Yep.
I'm guessing then at the bottom, we still need to add on that, if you don't understand this, please contact me
Yes.
in office hours. Got it. Okay.
But that might not count either. I mean, completely, I would do an announcement. So every time there's an assessment,
Mm-hmm.
the instructor could trigger an announcement or create an announcement that says you just, at the end of module 2, you have an assessment. If you have any questions on that, join me in office hours or join me in this discussion, and that'll close that interaction loop, right?
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
All right. I see other questions. Anyone else? I thought I did.
I think the person who had their hand raised is gone. Is there anyone else who has a question? There's a comment in the chat, Alex, that might be good for you to address too. It seems that maybe the student to instructor interaction at the same time defeats some of the purpose of online, maybe invalidating that online asynchronous category.
Wait. Say that again. Where is that?
So I don't know if Rob wants to extrapolate. I know Chris is gone, and Chris also
Seems
made
to
the
me
comment.
that student-instructor interaction at the same time defeats much of the purpose of online. So I don't understand that question, Rob. So in a well-designed online course, you need and this is not about RSI, but in a good design, you need instructor to student interaction, student to instructor interaction, and student to student interaction. That is, text.
I think the point is at the same time, the synchronous piece, perhaps.
So yes, but this, as we know, there are many different ways that campuses use online. Some of them do blended instruction. Some of them do high flex, and some of them do synchronous instruction that's online, right? There's many definitions of online and sort of permutations of amounts that are either synchronous or totally asynchronous. And so yes, if you're doing a fully online course, you wouldn't do the direct instruction piece. This is what we were just talking about with Maureen. You wouldn't avail yourself of that particular definition of substantive because your course is fully online. You're not doing it. The whole point of the course is that there are no obligatory synchronous elements, right? So in that particular case, if you don't have any obligatory synchronous elements, you wouldn't do the direct instruction to demonstrate substantive because it's against the design of your course, which is meant to be asynchronous. Does that make sense, Rob? I'm sorry if this doesn't, if I haven't been clear. Yeah, so if the course has synchronous components, then you could avail yourself of that element in order to demonstrate substantive, the element of substantive in that regulation. Do mid-course evaluations count as RSI? So again, unless there's an interactive component to it, no. So if there was a mid-course evaluation and then a discussion to talk with the students either as an optional one-on-one thing or as a whole group thing that's initiated by the instructor around the mid-course evaluations, then yes, that would count. But just a mid-course evaluation would not count. You mentioned an optional form to document, and you missed the details. Okay. Hey, Christy. So that document is here. Wait, let me get the shareable link to that. Copy, chat. All right, here's the link to that document. And it is in the, did it go? It is in the links document there. Just so that you know, it's there too. Was there another question? Oh, asynchronous videos or presentations probably count as number 3, providing information about the content. Sure they do. Sure they do. But it doesn't fully count as RSI unless there is a back, a feedback loop, right? So you can do a PowerPoint, you can do a video, beautiful videos, or audio, whether it's presenting content or related to feedback. Absolutely. But unless there's a mechanism that the instructor says, okay, here's this video and here's where we discuss it, and it's an announcement or it's in a discussion that gets set up specifically for that purpose within a module, then it wouldn't count as RSI. If you added your recorded lecture video inside a discussion and asked students to post questions underneath, could that be RSI? Yeah, I think that probably would work. Yep. Because you've got the whole thing, you've got the video, and then it's initiated by the instructor. So the student didn't initiate that, the instructor did, and then you have a discussion around that video within there. Yeah. I mean, and it doesn't actually technically have to be within the discussion. It could be, but it could be outside of the discussion, and then there's just an associated discussion with that video, right? Like technically how you implement that, you could do that in a couple of different ways. But yeah, you could put it right in the discussion also. Student to student, like if you did student-led discussions, right, that doesn't count, even if the instructor participates in that discussion because it's initiated by the student. But student-to-student discussions are an amazing, high-quality, mechanism in an online course for that type of interaction, right? You don't want to, this is not about quality. Again, RSI has nothing to do with quality. If you only do a course that specifically to the letter of the law is compliant with RSI, that is not a good course. It will not be a good course because there's no student-to-student interaction and no student-to-instructor interaction. It's only instructor to student. So that's kind of like, from the instructor to the student only. That wouldn't be a good design. So it complies, right? But it would not be a good quality course. All right, what else? Did I miss anything?
Yep, a couple more under that one. One is really just a comment that Carrie's making, and that if you provide live lecture and no one shows up, it's direct instruction, but just recording it doesn't count on its own. You'd have to do something with that lecture.
So if I provide a live lecture and no one shows up, it's direct instruction, but recording it alone doesn't. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, and if an instructor is providing a video as feedback on a student project, on a first pass before students submit their final project for grading. So the instructor is providing feedback on a project partially along the way. Is that RSI?
As long as there's a mechanism for the student to talk back to so if it's just push the video feedback to the student with no way for the student to talk back to the instructor, then it does not count as RSI. So you can't just assume that the student is going to know that. You have to provide the vehicle or the mechanism or the reminder or the the link or whatever it is for them to, if you give them an initial feedback and say, join me in office hours to discuss this feedback, and here's the way that you do that, then yes, absolutely, it demonstrates RSI. If you don't have that piece, then it doesn't. You need that back and forth. Yes, it needs to be, well, it's not back and forth. It's from the instructor to the student and an interaction, right? The video is not an interaction. The video is the instructor giving the student some content. The interaction only happens if the instructor also provides a mechanism for the student to interact with the instructor, right? Yes, Christopher, if the course has discussions that ask the students questions, if those questions are asked by the instructor, yes, that's instructor initiated. But if it's within the context of a student initiated discussion, then no. So, right, so if the instructor starts out the discussion asking the discussion question, and then students, talk back with the instructor, then yes. But if it's the student that initiated the discussion, then no. If the instructor is providing a video as feedback on student projects, oh, we already did that, right? If the student do not join, no. So again, this is where it's weird, David. You can set up the office hours and promote it, make announcements, and direct students to it in all different kinds of ways. And if no one ever shows up, it still counts as RSI. Again, this has nothing to do with quality. It's only to show, that the course is in compliance with this weird regulation. I don't know how else to say it. And some of it doesn't make sense. Some of it does make sense. From their perspective, it makes total sense. They're trying to differentiate between correspondence courses and what we would call, online education or distance education. And it's only for that purpose of financial aid. So they want to know that the instructor is available proactively, substantively, regularly, making themselves available to the student so that it's not a correspondence course. It's not like you set it and forget it, right? There's somebody there that is proactively working with the students to make sure that they understand stuff, that they can have somebody to ask questions of. So yeah, Alex, I see you.
Hi. So I asked and Aaron left a message, but so I'm now trying to think because I'm like, we're probably out of compliance. But if I were to obviously schedule weekly office hours where they can discuss content or feedback or bring up any questions, that's sufficient. But one of the issues is because we have so many remote students, I was telling you about, they're all over the country. Is it so? She said that it's possible if I set up by appointment and I give them a mechanism, though, for them to schedule the appointment, such as like Outlook Calendar, that would be sufficient. So they don't have to. I think the issue I have is like I'm concerned that my faculty are not going to want to sit for an hour every week or 3 hours or whatever it is. On a Zoom room that nobody shows up to. But if they're willing more than enough to schedule, it's just
Yep. And that would be fine if there's a mechanism for them, like Calendly or something, that they let students know they can use to schedule something, and the instructor sets up whatever their time frames are and availabilities are, and students can select from those hours in order to do it. They can do that. If you have issues with people being in different time zones, then you might want to consider, instead of a live synchronous interaction, which might not work for everyone. Someone else was mentioning, I think Chris Christopher or Dave, I can't remember, was mentioning that it defeats the purpose of the asynchronicity of the course, right? So an alternative, if you want to stay true to the asynchronous nature of the course, would be to have private one-on-one discussions set up in the course so that you could have anytime, anywhere, right? The student could come in and post their question or concern or their whatever they want in a private discussion that the instructor could then deal with whenever they are able to get it. But the key to that is the instructor sets it up and that diligently lets the student know in the syllabus as well as in announcements or with the assignments themselves where they would be able to get that one-on-one support and feedback, right?
Fantastic. Yeah, no, I think that for our sense, our faculty are already required to hold office hours, and many of them do already do this. It's just it's we don't have I guess a mechanism that is a traditional this is how everybody should do it. We don't have Calendly links, but we do have Outlook, and that's an easy way for everybody to schedule one. So I'll go ahead and kind of present that since they're already hosting office hours and willingly open to per their contract and willingly open to meeting with people at all different times. It works better for us, I think, that way. But both of these options are good options for us. It's just I'm trying to think of like an easy my main issue is I'm trying to think of an easy way that I can document on mass scale without being prescriptive to like in my head, I think I had told you that I would like to have like discussion boards in every course where I can easily monitor are they interacting with students and engaging by requiring like, 3 interactions with students or whatever. And I've taught at schools that have had that, but having office hours and having them just leave it in the feedback as well as having a clear mechanism would by far be the better cultural fit for our school than trying to, because we're mostly healthcare and discussions don't fit into all of our courses. It definitely is a good fit. So thank you for that. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. All right. Thank you for hanging out. Really appreciated everyone's time. I hope that, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out and I'm happy to chat with anyone about this and give you as much information as I know and have and point you to resources. The links document and the PowerPoint have links to, actual references to the actual regulation if you want to actually read it. And there again, there's a lot that has happened over time and who knows what's going to happen, in the future with all of this, but and the Department of Education's ability to manage and monitor and all of this, but things change and they based on feedback from all of us in higher education, they have come back and made adjustments to their language, made clarifications to their language. So at this moment in time, this is, what I understand to be the case with this particular regulation. That's not to say that that might not change in the future and be more refined or defined. And so, so we just continue to try and understand it and spread awareness. I think that's the main thing, to help people at every level, institutional, faculty, and instructional design levels understand some of the, the definitions and what counts and may not count, and how you might be able to use OSCQR to leverage the standards to support your ability to demonstrate compliance. So I appreciate everybody's time. Thank you. I love talking about this stuff. So don't hesitate to. I know it seems weird, right? But it's really interesting to me, and I mean everything with OSCQR I love. So let me know if you have any questions or need anything.
I think, Alexandria, I'm probably going to email you and ask if we can video chat. Because,
yes, let's have coffee.
Yeah, definitely. This is all really great, and I feel like a lone soldier where I'm at, and so I'm great to see all this.
You,
I'm like, my
you
first
found,
question is like, how do I help? How do I be on the team?
you found your people then. Come join
Yeah.
the group. And you know, there's lots of people who are interested in talking about stuff like this. And I'm happy, and Erin is happy. We're always happy to chat. You know, SUNY is a wonderful, amazing, huge system. And we have the benefit of having 64 institutions. Almost all of them have instructional designers and organizational structures that support the online activities at their institutions. And I'll have to caveat that by saying, you know, not every campus is the same in terms of their abilities, right? That some campuses, there's one lone person on the campus like you, and some have huge teams of people, right? So we're familiar with all of that, but you don't have to be alone. You know, you can join us as a friend of SUNY and be part of our group and have other people to talk to who love this stuff as much as or are interested in it as much as we are. And we have monthly community calls, and we have an annual conference, and we have the Facebook groups. And you know, also, you know, you can always hit me up or Erin in LinkedIn or Blue Sky or Mastodon, whatever you use. And if we have something to share, we are very happy and willing to share that with folks so that you don't have to feel alone and don't have to reinvent the wheel. We just happen to have been here doing this. This is my 30th year. I was the first instructional designer in SUNY, and that was in 1994. I'm not kidding, and I'm super old. I don't look it, maybe, I hope, but I am. So yeah, you don't. This is the unique thing about SUNY that I never realized, because this has only been my reality, right? For the last 30 years, we had all of these instructional designers that I had a hand in training, and all of these thousands of faculty and thousands of students, and then there's folks like you, Emily, who are kind of alone somewhere, right? And even within New York State, we have institutions that are not SUNY institutions where there's a lone person, right? So we always have been very, very interested in sharing what we know and what we do with others, so that we can also learn from what you know and do, and then also you know, open the doors so that folks don't have to reinvent wheels and can feel like there's a community that they can join to talk about this kind of stuff in case you are, like, you know, on your own.
And
Yeah.
Emily, you
Well,
can,
because
I left
go ahead.
some comments in the chat for the Oscar group, as well as my LinkedIn. I'm on Blue Sky as well. Please feel free to add. I work at a smaller institution, and I'm a department of one as well. So you are not alone. And Alex and I have been working together over the last couple of months as I adopt Oscar for the college. So you're not alone. And, you know, yeah, please reach out.
I'd love to help anyone get
Yeah.
certified in Oscar. You know, we do
I,
these webinars, and they're part of the certification. So if you're interested in becoming an Oscar reviewer or an Oscar trainer, or if you teach online and want to review your own course, you could get the for self-assessment. So, and you can also leverage it for your faculty. You know, you could have them do the Oscar workshop so that they can do self-assessments, and that might help you if you're a lone instructional designer trying to, you know, implement stuff on your own. We've worked with campuses to have them go through the Oscar self-assessment training and help them to initiate, you know, the use of Oscar at their campus. You know, it's not evaluative. That's one of the, I mean, it was designed purposely that way, right? To facilitate continuous improvement, not to judge or fail people, you know, in terms of quality, right? And I never talk about it as a course quality rubric. It's a continuous improvement rubric.
that's
So.
great. Well, what I would like to do is bring some of my skill set, because I've been teaching not since 1996, but since 2003. And way back in the day, no one understood a flipped model classroom. And I had stood up my own server and put Moodle on it so that I could give it to my Suffolk Community College students. I created the online program for GIS at Farmingdale, which is SUNY designated now. So I'm very excited. And I've been with American Public University since 2011. So I have a lot of experience and ideas and course design and model classrooms and leveraging the bright space. And I would like to contribute to helping the path, at least for at my college, for these things to happen and support the distance learning, what they're doing. But also sort of direct them, in that I can help too. I don't know. But more importantly, yes, if there's like Oscar training opportunities and things like that, I would love to help because um, I feel like everybody needs the framework so that they can be good online instructors. And you're right, it would support the faculty. So.
Right, that's right. Cool. Well, on that links page, it for the goodie bag, there's that Google Doc that has all the links. At the bottom of that page are the links to the different workshops, so you can check those out. And we're doing them every semester. There's also recordings, and so you can learn more about those sessions and look at past sessions that we've had if you're interested. So, and let us know if you have any questions. Great. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.